YouTube channel called Project Fear just published thermal footage captured over Area 51 of an as-yet undisclosed stealth aircraft that some have argued may well be America's new stealth fighter, Boeing's F-47. Now, I personally think it's a lot more likely that we're looking at a test flight of one of the technology demonstrators that we know Uncle Sam has been flying in secret for about 8 years now, all as a part of a classified X-plane program that actually resulted in Boeing getting that F-47 contract. So let's briefly run through what we know about this highly secretive effort that's already been underway for well over a decade. Now, both of America's publicly disclosed sixth-generation fighter efforts, the Air Force's F-47 and the Navy's F/A-XX, can trace their roots back to a 2014 study commissioned in secret by Frank Kendall, then the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, but later he'd become the Secretary of the Air Force. Now, that study, entitled the Dominance Initiative, was carried out by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA, over the course of the next year or so. And that DARPA study, which has not been revealed to the public, reportedly concluded that the next air superiority fighter program should not produce a single new fighter, but rather a family of systems, including a high-end new stealth fighter, the collaborative combat aircraft or drone wingmen we see in testing today, weapons like the AIM-260 beyond visual range air-to-air missile, and more. Now, as a result of this study, the Pentagon went on to secretly launch the aptly named Next Generation Air Dominance X-plane program, with a budget that Kendall described as about $1 billion. Now, those costs were divided somewhat evenly between DARPA, the Air Force, and the Navy, because both of those branches have a need for new fighters. The Air Force is looking for an F-22 Raptor replacement, while the Navy is looking for something to step in for their fourth-generation Super Hornet fleet. Now, in 2018, Boeing secretly built and flew their classified X-plane first, though we wouldn't know about it until 2020, when former Air Force acquisition official Will Roper admitted that the tech demonstrator wasn't just already flying, he claimed that it had already broken some performance records, though we still don't know which ones. Now, it doesn't appear as though Northrop Grumman opted to build a demonstrator for this competition, but in 2022, Lockheed Martin did, with their own classified tech demonstrator meant to compete for Air Force and Navy contracts. But Lockheed's entry apparently did not meet the Navy's criteria and was eliminated from the running to build a new carrier fighter. Northrop Grumman, on the other hand, bowed out of the Air Force competition but kept its sights set on the Navy's F/A-XX. And that means that ultimately the contract for the Raptor's replacement came down to Boeing versus Lockheed Martin, both of whom had secret tech demonstrators already flying, while the Navy's contract became a fight between Boeing and Northrop Grumman, who doesn't seem to have one flying, but for all we know does, and it's just still, well, classified. In March of last year, Boeing was announced the winner of the Air Force competition, and we are still patiently waiting to hear who will win the Navy's contract. So that means that we know for a fact that Boeing has had an air superiority X-plane flying for, well, 8 years now, while Lockheed Martin's had one airborne for about half as long. But it's important to understand that there is a distinction between technology demonstrators, pre-production prototypes, and operational aircraft, even if that distinction can get really blurry sometimes. Now, technology demonstrators don't actually have to look anything like the final aircraft. Heck, sometimes they're just commercial airliners with fancy gear strapped to them, like we saw in the F-22 Raptor program. Of course, they can be much more mature than that, and the more mature your tech demonstrator is, well, the more effective the testing can be, and you might even have a chance at starting to hash out new tactics or even doctrine based on that new platform's capabilities. But broadly speaking, a tech demonstrator is more rough draft than final product. Then we have a pre-production prototype, which is what Boeing is said to be currently building for the F-47 program. And it's a jet that's meant to look, fly, and act, a lot like the version that will ultimately see service. But it's important to understand that it's still not unusual to see even further design revisions as an aircraft makes that final leap to production and operational service. So that's all to say that this could be a peek at what the F-47 really could look like. But it also might not be, and there's really no way to know right now. And maybe just as importantly, we should also keep in mind that the US always has a long list of classified aircraft programs underway, meaning this exotic-looking jet might not actually have anything to do with the F-47 at all. So for now, all we really know is that Uncle Sam is, well, as we already knew, really good at keeping airplane-shaped secrets, and we're pretty fortunate that we just got a glimpse at one. But as for what it actually is, only time will tell, if it even does.